The Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast is proudly sponsored by New Vision.
My team, kinda power. I love the power. I love the power.
Hi and welcome to the Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast, a weekly show about all things Port Adelaide Footy Club. I'm your host, Macca 19, and joining me as co-host, we got Fishing Rick. How are you, mate?
I'm not saying anything. I'm getting picked on tonight. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. The internet's crap, and buddy, I'm lagging. But I'm here. I'm good. I'm excited. Big week of football, and for Harold, he should be very happy. I've got our main player back on the podcast, and Tango is back to join us. And Tango is here tonight to make sure we Ford Fairlane in check, because we know he loves to talk Port Adelaide, but we need to keep this content within an hour and a half.
Awesome. I thought when you said your main player was back, you meant me.
He's got you there, Rick.
Second main player.
The welcome return of Tango.
Speak to us, Tango.
She's saying move Jackson to the forward lines.
And joining us on the podcast, the welcome return of Ford Fairlane.
Thank you. Good to be back.
So how are we feeling for this week, boys?
Confident. Did that sound confidently confident?
Oh, I heard a little bit of a tremble there, but
I think this is probably our biggest test for a while. I think Sydney have obviously been playing some really good football over the last month to 6 weeks, and I guess we tip it out. That's a bit of a bonus for us, but it's going to be a really tough struggle up there. It's been a long time since we've won in Sydney, and even allowing for some ordinary form from us over the last few years before Ken's arrival, it's not a great record in Sydney.
Absolutely. I think we've only won there twice this century, so it's not a great record at all.
And we don't have Jared Polton to get us over the line.
No, or Jared Polek. No,
Jared Polek.
No, we do have JP Jasper Pittard. So
we do.
You never know.
Go the pit dog.
Go the pit dog. How about you, Rick? How are you feeling?
What is it? What's a win this week? Is a win actually a win, or is a win an honourable loss? It seems to be such a circumspect week in the media for us as a footy club when everyone's been giving us so much loving. The media seems to be getting sucked in with the Sydney juggernaut, which I'm not convinced is a juggernaut at the moment. And even us Port supporters are still lacking a little bit of faith. So I'm wondering if the supporters are thinking a win's an honourable loss at the SCG, or are we expecting a win? I'm confident without being arrogant. Obviously, Sydney is a massive challenge for us, and it hasn't been a happy hunting ground. But I would be expecting us to be putting in a very strong showing. And when I'm thinking Port Sydney in 2014, I'm looking at Port Sydney over 2 games and 2 legs, with the possibility that we might lose in Sydney. But then on the flip side, I would be strongly expecting a win against Sydney at Adelaide Oval. And if we break even over these 2 legs, well, then it's game on come finals time.
I think given Adelaide Oval and the Sydney Cricket Ground are both pretty strong contested footy grounds, I think either ground would be great to win at. And I think given our contested footy is probably underrated a bit in terms of we talked about our pace and outside run and what we can create through our best players. We certainly play a really strong contested brand of footy, and I think that'll hold us in good stead at the Sydney Cricket Ground. And I remember last year, Alan Richardson, who you guys might remember, I've almost forgotten him. I think he came to town last week for a game. Anyway, that he was talking about the dimensions of the Oval really lent themselves to tough contested footy, and that was a conversation he and Ken had had over and probably Darren Burgess as well in preparation for this year. So I think the sort of footy we play and the body strength and the type of player we've got in there is going to suit the Sydney Cricket Ground almost as much as Adelaide Oval.
Well, I watched Hawthorn Sydney this year, and I looked at that game and I looked at both of those sides and I thought we've got those teams covered. And the reason I thought we had those teams covered is because I thought both of those sides looked slow. And when we're playing our fast game of football, and I don't know if we are running out of juice like some people are alluding to, but if we play our fast brand of football, I don't think Sydney can keep up. And as Ford said, we've got the contested game now to get the ball out into the open spaces and run. And to me, that's why I think we do have an advantage over Sydney. And to be honest, at this point in time in the season, that's why we've got an advantage over the 17 teams, because we are the fittest and the fastest side. Now, are we going to come back to the pack? Are we going to wear out because we're still relatively young? Maybe. But we're still going strong.
Do you think Sydney is slow?
I do actually. I don't think they're the fastest side going around. I think their more direct ball movement now is making them look faster. But I thought that Hawthorn-Sydney game, those two teams to me, they looked slower than Port Adelaide.
Okay, that's fair enough. I would have said the exact opposite. I reckon they're a very quick side. But that's just me.
Well, maybe that's because they've fixed up their ball movement. Maybe their ball movements become a bit more direct, a bit more efficient, and therefore they're moving the ball faster. But yeah, from what I've seen of Sydney this season, I think Port's got them covered in the speed stakes.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I guess I always see Sydney as being a really strong contested footy side. Haven't really thought about. I think they've got enough pace. Otherwise, they wouldn't be as competitive as they are. But I think Rick's right as well that there's some pretty quick direct ball movement going on. And when you've got the big targets up there they've got in their forward line, you can pretty confidently bang the ball forward if you like. If you don't have time to build up some play, and certainly the Sydney Cricket Ground, you've got probably attacking from the wings. You could drop it well into the forward 50, and knowing you've got guys like Goods and Franklin and Reid up there, even would tip it out. It's some pretty decent marking power up there, and some good players at ground level as well if the ball hits the ground. So I think there's some pace in their side, and but also there's some really good direct ball movement. So I've managed to agree with both of you and not offend anyone.
That's it. Good fence sitting. I like it.
I tell you what,
I love a good fence sit.
It's a nice piece of work, that.
Fantastic.
Don't be afraid to offend us, Ford. We've got thick skin and we're happy to be challenged. Portia likes to challenge us every time she's on.
And every time she's not too, so that's all right. So we've brought in the big guns. We've got the captain Travis Boak. We've got Gus Monfries and Matty White coming back in for Sammy Gray, Benny Newton, and unfortunately Jared Pollock out with an ankle.
Yes. Yeah, that was bad luck. I saw that news tonight on the text message on the phone. I thought that's a bit unlucky. I thought Newton was a bit unlucky to miss out. I quite liked his game last week, at least in terms of the way he went and got the footy. I think his disposal wasn't great, but you can probably put that down to nerves. But I think he picked up like a dozen possessions in a quarter and a bit, and I think all of it was in contested situations.
Yeah.
Thought that would maybe just hold him in good stead for the Sydney game. I'm just wondering whether Youngie's maybe running out a bit of steam. He's had a fairly extended run in the side now, sort of subbing and coming off the bench.
Yeah, personally I would have probably kept Newton in for Young. I think Young needs a little bit of a run in the SANFL just to get a little bit of confidence back up. And you can never have enough contested ball winners against Sydney, and Newton is more of a pure sort of inside mid than Young is.
Yeah.
I'm a bit dubious on whether Boak will play though.
There was talk he'd rolled his ankle at training again, so I don't know how many times Kenny can pull that one, and naming Boakey and then pulling him out the day before. It might get a bit obvious after a while. But you think, looks like White and Monfries will both be back at least, so there's still a fair bit of firepower coming into the side. I still think we're about a 3-goal better side with Monfries in there because he's just so strong overhead. He's such a smart footballer. He'll drag guys up out of the forward 50 and open up the space there, and then he'll get back in there himself. And I was always thinking if he had a yard more pace, he'd just be absolutely devastating.
Yeah. So how do we feel about this game? me, I'm ridiculously pumped up for this game. I'm probably more eager for this one than any other game so far this year. I feel like we haven't really been given the respect that we deserve, which sounds a bit stupid considering we've only lost the one game by a kick so far this year. Do we feel that if we win this game, we'll finally be recognised, maybe amongst other AFL supporters as opposed to sort of the media and that sort of thing, as an AFL force this season? Or do we expect to be given the asterisk because Tippett and McGlynn are out?
I think
I don't think so.
There'll be an element of, I guess, of some, maybe, I guess amongst those who was, McGlynn and Tippett are out, are the people that are the ones that are dissing us anyway all the time. I think we've won quite a bit of respect this year. I think a lot of people think, we may not go all the way, but we're certainly the real deal as far as a top 14 goes.
Yep.
And obviously winning would really, if you win at the SCG, and Geelong lost there by 100 points a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
So you've got to say, if we win there, even with a couple of guys out, it's not like we're at full strength either.
True.
That always seems to be overlooked. Apparently we don't get injuries, only other teams do. So the people that are going to asterisk any of those results are the ones that will asterisk everything.
Yep.
And you just can't win. There are people that still try to asterisk the 2004 grand final, mostly former Brisbane players and coaches, not Sean Hart, of course. But I think we've won a fair bit of respect, and I think when we win in Sydney, then our stocks will really soar, because there seems to be a lot of talk in the media that Sydney, suddenly they're premiership favourites because they've had a good month of footy. Well, we've had a good season of footy, and
absolutely,
we're sitting at 10-1.
Yep.
Well, Sydney's played two more top 8 sides than us. They've lost one more game to a top 8 side, and obviously they've lost one to a bottom 8 side. So, how it can be argued that they're in much better form than us as a team is debatable. And I think the Geelong game is a bit of an anomaly, really. I think Geelong lost 2 key pillars in their defensive 50, which really threw them out structurally. But usually in the past, they've been a better team than that. But I do believe that their depth is now starting to be tested with retirements and loss of players. So, are they going on a downward spiral? Maybe not, but they're going to probably be exposed to more fluctuations from time to time. So, and look, no disrespect to Sydney, they played well as well in that game. But outside of that, they haven't been superior to us. Their percentage isn't superior to Port, and obviously their wins and losses haven't been superior either. So, the media is obviously just getting sucked in with the love of Sydney, that they've been consistent finalists for 13 years, and fair enough. And we've still got to prove ourselves. We've had one season last year where we won one final and then bowed out, and it's up to us to back it up. And I think if we win this week, we will command a lot of respect. But until we go deep into finals, we're still going to have question marks over our game plan. Can we sustain it? Is it viable? And we need to just prove that. And I have belief in Ken Hinkley and Darren Burgess, and the playing group are fit enough to maintain it. They've been doing well so far. And as Macca pointed out last week, our injuries are not really training injuries. They're collision football injuries, which means our players are going hard and doing what they're supposed to.
So look, let's talk about some matchups, because there's some really interesting players on both sides, and some pretty interesting matchups that could happen. I guess the main person to speak about is Buddy Franklin. He's kicked 18 goals in the last 4 games against Port Adelaide. I think we've done some pretty good shutdown jobs on him before when he was at the Hawks a few years back. Who do we really see going to Buddy? Do we do Trengove? Does Carlisle go to him? Obviously, he's probably our form defender. But we also saw Jack Homsch take Rewalt last week, who's probably athletically the most similar.
I think Bobby usually gets Buddy, and I think he's the one I'd go to first. I think with Rewalt last week there was a bit of mix and matching going on. I think a few picked him up during the course of the game. Yep. I think that's basically because of his engine. That the guy just runs and runs and runs, and you can't leave bloke on him all the time. It's really, if you mix it up a bit and say you've got someone who's always a bit fresh on him, that's fine. And but I think with Buddy, it's usually Bobby that gets him when he was at Hawthorn, and he'd be the one I'd start on him. Yep. I think Stephen May played on him when they played Gold Coast last week, and he's only 190 centimetres.
Did a pretty good job too.
Big, strong body, and he gets in the way, and he plays tight contested footy and tries to cut off the lead, and probably didn't really give up a lot of what you'd call genuine one-on-one goals to Buddy. So I think Bob can play the same style of footy, and we'll make him accountable as well, because he'll run off. Yeah,
I'd actually like Homch on him, to be honest. I think Homch can learn a bit from the Riewoldt game last week, and Buddy and Riewoldt play a similar game where they like to run out of the forward 50 and run up the ground a little bit more, and I do sort of think that will Bobby be able to go with him all the way up and back down the ground continuously. I think Homch has probably got a little bit more fitness on his side, and a bit of flexibility there. I don't know if we're smart enough to play it, but maybe Homch, when he runs out of the 50 and Bobby takes him as he comes back into the forward 50, if that's a possible strategy that we could play as a defensive unit. But probably those two I'd probably like my first. I don't know if Jackson would be maybe fast enough to go with Buddy.
Yeah, I think Trengo's probably the right matchup for Sam Reid. I'd love to see Homch start on Goods, just to see what he can do there. I think this is really the game where we need to see Homch sort of cutting off those leads of Buddy's at his best, I think.
You wouldn't want Jonas on Goods?
No, I'd probably start Homch on Goods.
Right, I'd be more keen, in my opinion. I'd be keen to lock down Goods, negate his influence. He seems to always have a damaging influence against us. I like your Trengo Reid suggestion. Pike could maybe expose us a little bit down back if with my structure if Bobby's on him. Yep. But yeah, I'd probably go with Jonas on the Goods, try and lock him down. And I mean, that's the depth of Sydney, isn't it? I mean, it's not going to be any of these matchups for a full game, and it's definitely going to be circulating between all the players. But it'll be interesting to see how each player goes on those respective players.
Absolutely.
So you wouldn't put Jasper on Goods then?
No, probably Jasper on a McVeigh who's been playing forward. Speed for speed, he should be able to keep up. One-on-one, hopefully he doesn't get exposed. And if McVeigh's playing a very attacking game, maybe Jasper can expose him on the counter.
I don't think we'll see Jasper playing on McVeigh for the sole fact that I think McVeigh's mainly been doing a sort of a forward tagging role. So I think we'll see McVeigh start on Brody, I reckon.
Okay.
Yeah.
A bit of a shutdown job there.
When we played them last time, O'Shea picked up Goods. Is that right? Am I remembering that right? When we won at Footy Park last year? I remember Goods. I remember O'Shea being in the area and the roll hurt his knee. So I'm assuming O'Shea was there. I think O'Shea was just a great guy to have there. That he'll drop into the space in front of tall leading forwards. In sort of that Montgomery kind of role, and I'm just wondering who might do that. I mean, Polek's sort of been doing a +1 role for us in the last couple of weeks, and in St Kilda, he was, especially when they were kicking with the breeze, he was starting at half back, and he just gives us so much rebound off of that half back line, just chopping off the ball and then returning it with interest back into our forward line. I'm not sure who'll pick that role up for this game, but we'll miss that particular bit of structuring up that he does. There's another guy who could drop back into spaces like that is Brad Ebert, because he's such a brave player and so hard working, and he's a big strong body as well.
We spoke about Tommy Jonas. I reckon he's probably the right matchup for Luke Parker. He's pretty much turned into the new Ryan O'Keefe for Sydney. He's such a manic tackler. He's a great goal kicker. He picks up heaps of the ball himself. He can move into the midfield. I reckon he'd be the perfect matchup for Tommy J.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable matchup. I always think of Luke Parker as sort of a smaller kind of forward, but Tommy plays so well on guys. He's probably got about a 6 to 8 inch range that he can work within between guys between 5'10" and 6'4". Yep. He's very good at a guy's a range of sizes, and I think he'd be a good matchup for Parker, who's a very strong body and good hard contested ball winner again. Sort of it's a given with Sydney players, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In terms of where's Jetta been playing lately? Is he across the midfield or up at half forward, high half forward?
I think he's more across the midfield. Yep.
Okay.
He's their leading inside 50 player.
So Matt White might be picking him up then.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think that would be the matchup that I'd go with.
That'll leave some scorched grass even on a wet day. I reckon the speed of those two.
Absolutely. I guess there's also Reece Shaw, who he might want to shut down coming out of defence as well. So he might play on him instead.
Yeah. I mean, Monfries probably could, if he does play, he could certainly pick up one of their rebounding defenders. Malcheski's the other one, of course, who's been in good form.
Yep.
And you probably want to try and negate their run off a half back.
Well, who do we see Dom Cassisi going to? Because he's in the side. He's done some pretty good shutdown jobs so far this year. Do we see him maybe playing a forward defensive role?
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
What does he go on?
Well,
does he go on the bigger body midfielders?
No, I think he'd be a pretty good matchup for Malcheski, to be honest.
They'd be a similar size, and Malcheski's not super quick or anything. And Dom, I think he's been terrific this year. I think a guy's might have been on the edge of, you would have thought, like Kane Corns a couple of years ago, on the edge of his career at the start of this year, and I think he's really responded well. I think his contested footy, his ability to get into the bottom of packs. I know he's had some horrible clangers in a few games and cost us goals, but gee, some of his just blue collar work ethic has just been fantastic, and certainly that would be a pretty good matchup for him, I think.
Yep. I guess the other main player to talk about is Josh Kennedy. He's just about as good as it gets in the AFL right now. He's probably only behind Ablett as the best player in the league currently. He's second in disposals in the AFL. He's third in clearances and second in contested possessions. Do we think we'll do a lockdown job on him as well, or will we see someone like an Ebert or a Wines go up against him?
I think you just go head to head with him. I mean, if he starts to create some havoc, but if you can certainly play on ball, could play a defensive role against him without it being a full on hard tag.
Yep.
And I think sometimes with some of these guys that are that sort of, like, given the size of the guy, 6'3" and about 95 kilos, you'd almost make him that sort of player that people just pick up responsibility for, depending which zone of the ground he's on, rather than trying to get someone to run with him. He may well, I mean, Ken may well throw Kane Corns onto him and just say, just sit with him. But it's a big matchup for Kane, who physically be giving away a fair bit of height and weight to Kennedy. So maybe it is just a matter of a defensive on-ball role and then other guys picking him up, rolling through the ground.
I think we'll see Corns play on Hanbury again. I mean, he did a fantastic job against him last year.
Yep.
He kept him to 13 disposals, and in a year where Hanbury almost won a Brownlow, I think his game against Port last year was probably his worst game for the season.
And he'd had a few 40 possession games leading up to that, or close enough to it, didn't he? He was in
Corns killed him.
Form. Yeah, Corns, he's another one who's just keeps on keeping on. I think that's fair, and I think that probably would be the matchup for Kane then. I
mean, we're talking about, I guess, the defensive matchups, but we've got a lot of players that they need to look out for as well. I mean, Ebert, Oak, Wines. You're talking about Wingard, Gray, Hartlett. I mean, we've got so many guns on just about every single line. They're going to have to be on their toes as well.
Oh, that absolutely. I think we get underrated a bit there for just the individual star power. I think people talk a lot about, they've got a lot of first-round draft picks, and they talk about us as if we're just some sort of even bunch of scrubbers. And if we'd have done a love and a hate earlier, I was going to mention Rowan Connolly's midweek or mid-season or Australian team that he brought out midweek, where he basically put in one Port Adelaide player.
Yeah. And
said, he had Robbie Gray in there and said, I would have put Chad Wingard in, but Gray kept him out. And you think, what sort of logic is that? That he and Gray are vying for the same spot. And I'm thinking it's kind of weird, that Wines, Boak, Hartlett, Gray, Wingard, even Westhoff, who probably hasn't been producing a lot in terms of goals, but just his effort up and down the ground and his defensive work as a loose man in defence and then going up forward and at least creating an option up there, it just doesn't seem to get recognised. I mean, even Matty White, I don't think anyone seems to take too seriously at the moment outside of Port Adelaide.
Yep.
He has an enormous role at Port, and Poleg's
Definitely.
just been fantastic. I mean, it's been borderline, between him and Dal Santo for Recruit of the Year. And, I mean, in 3 years, I know who's still going to be playing and who's going to be an even better player than he is now. And what Poleg's shown this year, I mean, Brisbane must look at Poleg and go, who is that guy?
Yeah.
He's got the same name as the guy we let go, but he doesn't look the same. And, so I think people sort of underestimate the talent we've got in that side, and that midfield is so deep now with really good players. I mean, it's not about it's a deep midfield because it's a whole bunch of B graders that are okay. It's some genuine
It's got
talent.
some serious star power.
Tango, what are you doing? Stop it. Blow those candles out now. Oh, sorry. You guys were just having a love-in for the last 15 minutes, and Tango was molesting me on the bed. So
Sounds like you might have been too.
what are we talking about? Run.
Are you making
maybe.
bacon, Rick?
I got my Jasper Pittard Guernsey on, and photo, and Brendan Archie's up on the wall
Tango's
as
getting
well.
randy.
And yeah, Tango's getting a bit randy. Steady on, girl. What's going on there?
Who do they need to look out for the most?
Well, all of our bloody team, because we've got a fantastic team, and it's disgraceful that we only had one player in an expert journalist All-Australian side halfway through the season. If this was Geelong circa 2007, the whole team would have been All-Australian.
Absolutely.
It's disgraceful. And as you guys rattled off, we've got a dozen players out of that 22 which need to be respected, and if they don't, Sydney's going to get burnt. But unfortunately, the Sydney Football Club aren't the media, so they're not stupid, and they're not going to get lulled into any of this media bias. But look, I'm really hoping to see Hamish Hartlett back up last week's game. I thought he was an inspirational leader for us, and I'd really like to see him back that up again. And he's one player that I think can be a very lethal weapon for us on the small SCG. I mean,
Absolutely.
he can be inside the square and he can be banging it deep. And Sydney, I think, are going to be paying very close attention to him, which is what you guys are saying. They try and lock down Hamish Hartlett. Well, then Brad Ebert or Travis Bokey or Robbie Gray or Chad Wingard are going to come up and cause them problems. So, again, we're getting back as supporters this mentality of, we've got to watch out for Sydney. But, yeah, they've got to watch out for us. And I think a lot of teams haven't been doing that this year too well, and that's why we're sitting on top with 10 wins and 1 loss. And hopefully these players can back it up again this week.
I think Hartlett with his legs, certainly, he's almost got that Stuart Dew capability of really tearing open a team's backline with some really long precision kicking into the forward line. Probably not quite the depth of Stewie's kick, but it's a pretty big weapon. And I remember
he's been doing it a lot more this year as well, which is
I think he's got
to
free rein from Ken. And I think one of the things that when we used to play at the Sydney Cricket Ground was we never played the ground very well. We always seemed to think we had to work it up to the forward 50 and then work it around the arc and try and get in there and get an easy shot at goal. And I remember it used to drive me crazy because we'd have Stewie Dew there and instead of banging it up to the top of the goal square or hitting up targets from 50 metres away, he'd get up to the 50 and then chip it sideways 30 metres. To, Roger James would chip it sideways to maybe Shea Cockatoo Collins or something. We always play the Sydney Cricket Ground really weirdly, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing us play there under Ken Inkley and seeing how Ken attacks the SCG. And I think with Phil Walsh there in doing tactics and analysis, and Sean Hart, who's got a really good football brain, and the other assistant coaches, this is one of the things that really interests me about this game, is just simply how we'll play the ground, because I think we've played it bizarrely over a number of years, and would really love to see us attack, and it's a small ground, and just attack the front of the goals and create some havoc in their back line.
Absolutely.
What are we doing, the big four, Macca?
Yeah, let's get onto it, mate. Time to stand up. Rick, who's going to stand up?
I'm going to go a bit off ball with this one and say it's time to stand up our contested ball unit. I thought they were pretty poor against Melbourne. We sort of came back hard in the second half against St Kilda, but we need a 4-quarter consistent effort of winning that contested ball and getting it out to our runners and moving the ball quickly.
Yep, fantastic call.
I think just 4 quarters of switched on, focused football. I think the problem with playing these lower ranked sides is I think teams do tend to take the foot off the pedal a bit or take it a bit easy in games. I think the great challenge with the Hawthorns and Geelongs and now the Sydney teams of this world is that you can't afford to relax and you can't afford to lose your focus in a game, and we've really got to keep switched on and just play really, really good hard footy and get that spread happening and that run happening and open them up. I think no doubt about the contested footy, but also I think in terms of getting the ball out and getting the run happening and the overlapping run, especially at Sydney Cricket Ground, that's going to be a really vital part of this game.
Definitely. Mine's kind of linked to yours, Rick. I've chosen Matthew Lobie. It's the Big Lobster's time to stand up. I think if we're going to win, we're going to need a huge effort from Lobie this week. I think his breakout game in the AFL last year was against Sydney, where he dominated the hitouts and the contested ball as well. I think we really need to see him do the same this week against what really is a fantastic midfielder, especially with Mike Pike coming back in as well. We really do need first use of the ball. And the one thing that Sydney do is they do give up a lot of hitouts to their opponents, and I think we really need to make the most of that this week. Now, the danger man, Ford. Who is your danger man this week?
I think
we've got
any number of them. I mean, Adam Goodes always makes our lives hell, doesn't he? I think he's not quite the Boomer Harvey of Sydney, but geez, he's darn close, and he's been a real handful for us for a number of years. And even in games where you think you haven't seen that much of Adam Goodes this half, then suddenly he'll come out in the second half and basically create 6 goals and kick a few himself. Yep. And I think he's always the one that drives you crazy, and when the game's there to be won at the end, he's the one that's most likely to stand up and take it away from you.
Yep.
Kennedy.
I
want to see him locked down. But then saying that, I want to see Ollie Wines and Kennedy, because he's sort of got the present and the up and coming future, but I don't think Ollie Wines would do a lockdown role on Kennedy, so that's not really his role. But yeah, I'd really like to see us stop Kennedy and his influence.
Yep. I'm going to pick Nick Miaucheski. I think he could play a bit of a Mzungu role, as we saw against Fremantle, where he sort of dropped in front of the hole in front of our forward line, and he could very easily pick up a lot of marks at will and sort of run it out and give it off to Reece Shaw and that sort of thing. I think he's as good as it gets for a creative back flanker. So he's my danger man this week.
You know, talking about Kennedy quickly, could Tom Jonas maybe run with Kennedy?
Well, he's probably about the same height and size as him, so yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
I just wonder whether you want to pull Tom out of that backline role where we've got such a set pattern with the backline and they all cover each other so well, and then to really run him hard, and then what does he do then? Does he drop back into the backline and try and catch his breath and possibly get exploited by a small, quick forward? You know, if say a Parker's there.
I would personally go with Ollie Wines. I think Ollie Wines, I'd have him standing right next to Kennedy at the stoppages, interlock the arms and, just try and out-bustle him, really. Now, the key to winning, Rick.
Well, it's almost the first comment that I said, isn't it, really? Yeah. Basically, my key for us to win is I really want us to focus on the contested ball. As I said before, it was pretty poor against the Melbourne game, and St Kilda's really not a true reflection. They just disrespect the St Kilda fans at the moment, but they're a pretty average side, and if we dish up that, we're going to get blown apart. So a key for us is going to be our contested ball and getting that outside run and direct run. As Ford was rightfully pointed out, we can't do this chippy indirect slow play at the SCG. Sydney's just going to run back, and then we're going to and then we're going to be having a flooded in the inside 50 and got nowhere to go. So we need to be brave, as we like to be, and take the game on, run direct lines and win the clearances, and I think we'll go a long way. And as I said earlier, I think I'm putting my neck on the line, and I'm happy to do that because I do it every week anyway, make myself look like a goose. But I think we're a faster team than Sydney, and I'm hoping that we can expose it on Saturday, and hopefully it doesn't rain because that might be in Sydney's benefit.
Yep.
Yeah, well, pretty much the same, isn't it? It's really winning that hard contested footy. This is a game that we've got to play our best sort of, butt head kind of football, I guess. And you're banging heads against the opposition. They're a very strong side. They win a lot of hard ball, and that's where we have to beat them. And I think that's where Ken will want us to beat them, is in that hard contested footy, and get it quickly and direct into a forward line, and try and keep that forward line open, and maybe even pull the tall forwards up the ground a bit and get it over the top for the runners to get onto, or a Wingard on the lead out of the goal square even. I'm not sure how just how crowded it gets in the SCG, but as long as you've got good movement there. But it's really about that quick, direct movement. As I said before, I mean, I've seen us play that ground so often where we're just not quick and direct. And often, well, with games we've won there, it's been either the quick, direct movement, or it's been the game looks like it's slipping away, and then you just bang it in long anyway, and that suddenly you're creating goals. Whereas if you try and go in there with a really precise approach, it's just not going to work there.
Mine's pretty much the same variation on a theme here. It's fast and direct movement. It is a little bit hard to do on a ground the size of a primary school oval, but I really want to see us take the game on. Don't allow them to set up behind the ball. Go really quick and direct down the corridor, and really hope for the likes of Schultz and Westhoff to take some grabs inside 50. And if they're not, then see what Wingard and Monfries and Gray can do inside 50 as well. It's going to be really hard to do with their manic pressure, but I think our handball skills are probably the best in the league. And we've shown this year against really good opposition that if we do take the game on, we normally come out of it very well. Now, prediction time. Ford, who's going to win?
Port Adelaide by 14 points.
Nice. Rick?
Shit. Port Adelaide by 1 point.
Oh, 1 point.
You talked it up so much, I thought you were going to say like 48 points.
Nah, Adelaide Oval maybe
if
different.
We win by a point. I'm going to tip. Rick, you'll be very happy. I'm going to tip Port Adelaide by 9 points this week. Stunned silence. This is great.
Is that the Macca reverse curse?
I think Rick's dropped dead.
Yes.
What did Macca pick?
Port Adelaide by 9 points.
You just made Tango explode. Now we're done. What the hell's going on here? You're confident, Macca?
I'm very confident. I think we'll win. I think we'll get up.
Well done, I'm proud.
I don't know if this is a bad thing or not. I'm quite scared.
See what you like by Saturday morning. You might have changed by then.
True, yep.
You might have got some sleep.
Well, this is also true. I could be delirious, but you never know.
You could be.
This is the beckoning of Port Adelaide, the power of 2014 and beyond. So we should all be confident.
Absolutely.
Cheer, cheer the black and the white. Honour the Magpies day and by night. Live that.
All right, SANFL time. Port are playing Woodville West Torrens at Alberton Oval on Sunday. We've got a 35-33 win-loss record, and we've played them once already this year in round 3, and we won quite comfortably by 58 points. What do we want to see out of this game?
A win.
A win?
I think with the SANFL, what I'm really enjoying with the SANFL, apart from the winning, is that the development of a reserves team has turned out the way we hoped it would. I mean, in theory, it sounded good, and we were all pleased when it happened. But just watching them play and watching the kids come through, and I had a mate of mine who went last week, and he was raving about just how good Carl Amon looked, and Darcy Byrne-Jones, and I think just the pin-up boy in Daniel Flynn at the moment. He's just been amazing. I mean, you consider he's a guy that's the size of Tim Evans, who runs with the speed of Bruce Light. It's just amazing to watch him. Or if Jumbo's listening to this, the size of Rick Davies, who runs like Michael Graham. He would have been a phenomenon back in the 70s and probably even the 80s. He's 6 foot, near 6 foot 390 odd centimetres and 95 kilos, and just some of that run off the back line. But guys like Amon and Darcy Boone-Jones, and you think last year they would have been out at South Adelaide and West Adelaide, they'd probably dropped to the reserves. And I think the beauty of it is they're playing league footy. Boone-Jones has been playing really well. Amon's probably been a little more inconsistent, but his good stuff is just really top shelf. And they're getting the chance to play. They're playing in a winning team. They're contributing enough, and they're learning how to play at that league level.
No, it's not, but I reckon Daniel Flynn's the player that we'll all be talking about every week on this podcast for probably 5-10 minutes if we want to, because I think he's the most exciting future prospect in the Port Adelaide Football Club. And you hit the nail on the head with your description of him, Ford. To me, it's just, I just want to see and read what he's doing every week, because it's just amazing, his size, his speed, and the skill he's accumulating so quickly. I can't see how he can't be on our AFL list next year, and the influence that he's going to exert at AFL level, if he keeps this tracking, is going to be amazing.
Yeah, well, as we spoke about last week, you would think it's a Monty at this point that he'll get a proper senior list offer at the end of this season.
We're lucky, really. I mean, we're not lucky, but good list management now that's evolving, because to think that we've got Newton plodding away in the reserves, biding his time. We've got Cam O'Shea, which is a bit of a luxury to have him back there at the moment. And you've got Flynn plying his trade. I mean, those last two players could be line-breaking half-back flankers for us, in addition to the guys that we've got. That's going to give us some real depth with those half-back flanking positions, and give us real line-breaking ability, which is probably the most important attribute footy teams need in this modern sort of zone football. To have Jasper, Flynn, O'Shea, Polak, just to name Matty White, to name a few, that's a lot of line-breaking players that you'd want to try and squeeze into one side, isn't it?
Yep.
All right, lads. I reckon we might leave it there for now.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on again, Ford.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Go Port Adelaide.
Did well, mate.
Go Port Adelaide.
I can see the Tim Ginniver influence going on here. Go to Power.
None of us wants to
Not at
be the
all.
one to say.
Go Port Power Footy Club.
Established 1996.
Go Port Power!
What a handball from... Could be a catastrophic error. And Wingard can make it really, really sting. It's there, Wingard! From the dead pocket.